I am, like many of you, trying to plan ahead for 2024, figure out how I can become a better version of me this year. For some reason, January just feels like a good time to make new commitments, feel like you go into the new year with a whole load of extra motivation, ready to change everything about your life. But I think there are a few ways that we can do this a little bit more healthily. The first thing is quantity. It's easy, particularly at the start of the year, to go in with so much motivation that we want to just change absolutely everything about our lives. And that might be fine for week 1 of January or even week 2 of January. But once we get to April, once we get to June, all that just gets a little bit overwhelming. And so I think the first thing we can do before we do anything else is just figure out what's actually important. Cut some things off our list and try and reduce it down to 2 or 3, maybe 4 things that we can really focus on this year. I personally find it quite helpful to think about the areas of my life. So that might be health, family, work, whatever they are for you, and just try and work out what's one thing I can focus on in each of the main areas of life rather than trying to do absolutely everything. The second thing is the actual idea of goals themselves. So much of the time, goals can be pretty arbitrary. I want to run a marathon in September, or I want my business to turn over £50,000 this year. I think the problem with that is our brains start to realize pretty quickly as we head towards these goals that they are just arbitrary. They are just plucked out of the air. And so we start to rationalize with ourselves and convince ourselves that actually maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it's not as big a deal as we thought it was when we had loads of motivation at the start of the year. And so the alternative to goals, which I think is actually far healthier and more sustainable, is to think about habits. Or another way to look at it is becoming a particular kind of person. Just think that's a healthier and easier thing to focus on. So rather than putting all the energy into, I want to run a marathon in September, instead thinking, I want to become a person who runs regularly to stay healthy. You can add metrics and numbers to it to measure it. But I think the important thing is to make sure that the thing we're aiming for is to become a particular kind of person who does certain stuff or doesn't do certain stuff, rather than just setting a goal. This has been my issue loads in the past with running. Over the last 10 years, I've probably tried to get into running 4 or 5 times. And each time, for some reason, I've set my goal to be, I want to be able to run 5K. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of how popular this couch to 5K thing is, but each time that's been my goal going into it. I want to run 5K. And so I put on my running shoes, I go outside, I start running. Maybe I manage 2K the first time. Then I go out again a few days later, 2.5K. And then 3K, and then maybe for a few weeks I'm stuck at 4K, and eventually I push through 5 kilometers in one go, feel great, and then I just stop. I've reached my goal. I'm not really that motivated to carry on running because my goal wasn't to be a runner, it was just to run 5K. And so I do it for a few weeks and then I just stop. And I've genuinely carried on that pattern probably 5 times in the last 10 years, where I start out rubbish, get to 5K, and then I just stop again. I don't know what it's like for you. You might have similar things in your life, but I think it just shows how important it is to focus on the right thing, to become a particular kind of person rather than just meet a certain goal. The final thing that I personally find really helpful is to focus on what we're putting in rather than what the result might end up being. Very little in life do we actually have that much control over results, but we almost always have control over what we bring to the table, what we put into something. This YouTube channel is probably a good example for me. It would be nice to say by August this year, I'd like to have 3,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. Well, that would be quite cool. But at the end of the day, the reality is I've got very little control over that happening. There's not that much I can do to make sure that happens. I can do positive stuff that might gently push people in that direction, but I really can't do that much to make sure I get that exact number by that exact date. And so I don't think it's that helpful a goal because it's outside of my control. But instead what I can focus on, which is actually going to be one of my commitments for this year, is to be posting, for me, twice a week, these kind of videos, make them as good as I can, and just see what happens. And that might mean that by August there are 3,000 people subscribed, or it might not. But either way, I've been posting regularly, I've been learning, I've been getting better at something, which surely is the point of all this anyway. So that just feels like a much more helpful way to look at setting goals, make them things that you can control rather than some mystery outcome that you don't actually have that much control over. So hopefully that's helpful as you're planning and thinking and dreaming ahead about what might happen this year. Just some helpful tools, hopefully, about how you can use this year to become a better version of you rather than fill up your mind with thousands of arbitrary goals that you can't actually control and you'll probably end up giving up on by February. Let me know down below what kind of things you're committing to this year and we can journey together as we use 2024 to be a year where we become better versions of ourselves, not just for us, but for the people around us as well. Happy New Year, and I'll see you soon.